Hello, everyone. I'm Raul Fernandez, Select Board Member and Chair of the Task Force to Reimagine Policing in Brookline. This is our meeting for October 16th, 2020. Thanks for being with us. We've got just a few things to do today. We're going to try to keep this meeting to an hour to provide more time for, I know at least one of the subcommittees is going to meet in that second hour. And we'll talk a little bit about subcommittees in just a bit. We're going to do subcommittee updates, and we're also going to talk a little bit about preliminary report to the board. This will just be a brief oral report to the board next Tuesday, and just want to hear if there is anything from you that you think we should be sharing with the board at this early stage in our work. And so we'll start first by any announcements or updates that any members of this group would like to share. Okay. All right, good. So let's get right into then our subcommittee updates. We've got, we'll go in this order, what we have on our calendar: Departmental Analysis, Envisioning / Community Engagement, School Resource Officers, Vulnerable People and People in Crisis, and the Walk and Talk Unit. So Departmental Analysis, how are things going?
Well, we had one meeting and we tried to cover a lot of ground, I would say. And I think we need to have a second meeting soon to figure out the next steps. I mean, we spent some time in our first meeting talking about the survey that was before last week's vote. And I think we need to follow up both on that, and we need to follow up on some of the other ideas, like about some of the other projects, getting more data from the department and so forth. So I guess I'll just say we need to have another meeting soon, which I will hope to schedule soon.
Anyone else from that subcommittee want to weigh in? Feeling good. Mike Chichi and myself are also on that subcommittee.
Yep.
Feeling good. Much work to be done. So yeah, let's get to it. Any questions from the rest of the task force about that work?
The only thing I wanted to ask is to confirm is I'm assuming we're not meeting in the second hour of this time slot.
We did not schedule that. Okay. So I will send us an email to try to schedule today for next week.
All right, thanks.
Great. Almas.
I'm just wondering how the Departmental Analysis Subcommittee relates to the Accountability Committee in the Reform Code for the police reform, because it seems, at least I don't know enough about, accountability, but it's like they're doing things to also analyze the department. And so it's just throwing, a question out there. If there are things that they learn that we can borrow from.
Yeah, it's a good question. We'll have to watch each other's work and see what ground they're covering and think about what ground we're covering. Good. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to Envisioning Community Engagement.
Good morning. I'm chairing that group. We've had one meeting last week. We're meeting after today's task force meeting. And I just wanted to try to cover a little bit of the terrain that we talked about in our most recent meeting. We've acknowledged together the scope of what we can attempt to do is vast. And the work that we can then feel empowered to take on as a subcommittee, we need to get particularly sharp about because the impact of the community engagement work is particularly important for us as a town. In our meeting later today, we arrived at 3 questions that we think we want to wrestle with, just given the time that we have. The first is, what do we mean when we say community? A good chunk of our discussion, both at our last task force discussion and then also as a subcommittee. We want to make sure that we're not talking in code and that we're also being particularly clear especially because we've chosen to implement a survey that needs to draw on specific voices in the town in order for us to be able to move forward confidently. That we need to be clear when talking about community and then the differential work we need to do for varying groups in the town of Brookline. The second question that we're going to think about taking on in our subcommittee is what is our decision or our decision as a task force to move forward with the survey? What does this mean for the community engagement work that we're teed up to do? As we saw during the larger task force meeting, there are differences of perspective about the survey itself. We're moving forward with it. And so we need then to decide how this is going to inform the community engagement work that we have the potential to do. And the third question is just going back to something that Bonnie introduced during both the task force and some of our subcommittee time was, this is not a majority wins approach that we can take on this. We need to find ways for us to take the data that we get from the survey, what we learn from that data, and then figure out how's the data analysis and the process of updating and informing the community going to be implemented in a way that cannot go with a, this is what the majority of the group says, therefore that's what we're doing approach. So we're going to be digging into those three questions later on during our time together. Tackling any one of them would be good, but tackling all three of them may be a bit ambitious. And so we'll take some time during the outset of our meeting just to frame where we're going to push in. Any other subcommittee members? I hope that feels like a faithful accounting of our time, and certainly add in anything that I might.
I just wanted to ask a logistical point for the meeting after this task force. Was there a link or should we just stay on this Zoom link?
I have a Zoom link. I can post it in the chat for you if you like. It should also be, it's posted on the town calendar.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions about this subcommittee's work? I think these are excellent questions that, you know, one of the things I was thinking about before is sort of figuring out what the four corners of your work are going to be. And that's going to be up to you all as subcommittee members. And so these questions are really helpful, I think, in framing, you know, putting some bounds on how you're going to focus your work. So I think it's great. Any other questions or thoughts from either subcommittee members or anyone else in the task force? Okay, good stuff. Looking forward to following your work there. School resource officers.
So we have not actually met yet. There's been a lot of back and forth and miscommunications about nailing down a time. There was a hope for a Thursday at 1 o'clock time that people would only be able to meet for half an hour. And then there was some confusion about whether that would actually work week to week. So I think we need to really get serious about finding a time for next week.
Okay, great. One of the things that we can do next week is use this time as subcommittee time. I don't want subcommittees to get in the habit, though, of having this time available to them. That won't always be a possibility, but I think for next week, it's safe to say that we can set aside these 2 hours if subcommittees want or need to use them to meet, then you can certainly do that next week. But again, I mean, we're going to need this time in the future, so it certainly shouldn't be a regular meeting time. Okay. All right, look forward to hearing back on that. Next one is vulnerable people and people in crisis.
I guess I can go first and Anne and Alexander can jump in. So we've been meeting, I think we had our third meeting yesterday, pretty regularly Thursdays at 6 o'clock. We have really worked on gathering information from other towns, countries, and that's what we've gathered a lot of articles that are actually in the resources in the SharePoint. So anybody has access to them from this committee. And we've been working on looking at it, figuring out what stands out for us so that we can start getting ready to put a draft recommendation together. Meanwhile, we're also trying to think about who we want to interview. There are tons of people we want to talk to, but we wanted to prioritize given the time. And so we are focusing on, the Brookline Mental Health Center, the social worker, Annabelle Lane from the Police Task Force, and someone that we talked with at the domestic roundtable that we attended, domestic violence roundtable that we attended last week. Who works for the Jewish Family and Children's Services, who, was very interested in talking with us. So I think those are the people we were. And also there's a Massachusetts-based police sort of reimagining like mental health issues. I know Alexander has been working on getting us to talk to them. It's called BEST. I forget exactly what the acronym stands for. Boston Emergency something crisis, something like that. But we'll be talking to them as well. So I think that the tricky part for us is like figuring out interviews and like how to schedule it. We understand that anything like that needs to be posted on the agenda, like if we're going to interview people. So it's just the coordination of that piece that we're struggling with a little bit. We also have some questions about, and also hopefully this next Thursday, Anne has offered to put together like a very rough draft outline for our recommendations. So hopefully we'll talk about that next Thursday. One of the questions we had was if once we start putting the recommendations together, is there a way to share it on Google Docs, or do we have to like just do it during our meeting? Like, we're not sure about that. So we wanted to bring up that question to see if we could get an answer, or do we have to like meet about it like in a public fashion and review the Google Docs, or is there a way to do it outside that?
Michael, can you help us out a little bit here?
Yeah, could you just, I missed sort of the beginning of the question. Could you?
Yeah, so we're starting to, when we start working on our draft recommendations, if it's on a Google Doc, we're wondering whether we need to like review that document in a public kind of fashion, like have a, because of the open meeting law, or can we do that Google Docs like separately from our public meetings?
So like an ongoing document with recommendations or with thoughts as to recommendations?
Right.
I mean, how do we create it? We would like to create it together. I'm gonna put together a really, really simple outline to give to the group next week that we can work on in the group. But when we actually start writing this, it would be obviously much easier for us if we had a Google Doc that the three of us could contribute to, edit each other, suggest changes as a group. But how do we do that and stay within open meeting law? How do we write a document?
No, that's a good, I mean, this is the first time this has come up actually for me, which is, you would think it would have come up before, but thinking on the fly that if there's like an ongoing document and it's being shared between the subcommittee, and it does contain, so if you're writing it in and it does contain your thoughts or your opinions as to recommendations, and then it's being shared because it's a live document, it's being shared with the group, I would think that would fall under the open meeting law in terms of having to, unless I see Mike Sandman. If you have a
sure.
Differing...
So you set up a Google Doc, you can set it up so that the members of the committee can edit it, and any member of the public can read it, but not edit it.
Oh, okay.
And that's what we've done. We don't use Google Docs a lot, but it's very effective. It's really a wonderful tool and very easy to set it up. So when you set it up initially, whoever sets it up can control that. Who to edit, who's allowed to just see it.
Okay, and then it's made available to the public to at least just view, not provide input. Okay, that's great.
And then where do we post the link? Do we just have that? I created a folder on the OneDrive, but where we've put all the information, and we know that all of you can access what we've posted in the OneDrive folder, but I'm not sure the public can. which was
So
another question I had. So, but where do we post the link to,
I mean,
to have the public look at?
just very quickly, and Michael, I mean, tell me if this is right. Just occurred to me since our meeting last night, I think our subcommittee website would be a great place to do that, right? Just on the Reimagining Committee website on the town site.
Is that, Mike Sandman, is that where you put, for the advisory committee, is that where you put the Google Docs or?
We posted on the advisory committee website, but we also, I mean, we've also circulated it generally, so you can put it on the town meeting member association listserv, and if there are a few of us here who are town meeting members, any of us could do that. That's a useful thing to do. But if you put it on the website, that's sufficient notice.
What website, just to be clear?
Your subcommittee page on the or the task reimagining page on the town website.
Okay, so which is different than the OneDrive, right? The OneDrive nobody can access except us, right?
The OneDrive is an IT person's dream for making things difficult. It's in my humble opinion, it's completely separate. Now, put it on the, if you put it on the advisory, on the Reimagining Task Force website, then it's a public. Nobody can get it one except those who have explicit permission.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Mike.
If you have something, thank you all. If you have something you'd like to get out there before next week, then share that with Kate. And after Devin returns, you can share that with Devin, and we can make sure we get that posted on the website. That should be pretty simple. Yeah, Kristen.
So I just wanted to name that I think a number of us, this is really good information to have, and I think it speaks to the struggles that a number of us have had in trying to organize subcommittee work, in that we're trying to abide by open meetings law and then also trying to work with our very busy schedules. And so the degree to which we can have a process that allows us to contribute information that rather than saying we have to meet in order to exchange information, then we want to make sure we have the right guidance legally, and then we can use the right technology in order to get this done. But I think it's, as a, I want to be over dramatic, but a little bit of a game changer just in terms of how we can use our time.
Yeah.
Can we just go on with our update on our meeting briefly? I mean, one thing we wanted to bring up today, and I'm sure there are other things, so Alexander and Almaz, please help me remember, is can we have a 1-week extension on the first recommendation, draft and recommendations of what we should be doing next, which was originally November 6th, I think. And just another week would be helpful for us for part of the reasons that we're all talking about now in terms of working together as a group and abiding by open meeting law. And it slows down the work a little bit. Also, it's looming, the deadline, and we're still dealing with a lot of information to process and think about in terms of what it would mean for Brookline. We'd like to interview some people. Annabelle Lane, I hear, is not available until the last week of October. She's at a training. And then there's this election coming up that may affect our availability in terms of finishing a draft. So is that okay if we extend our recommendation?
Any objections? Hearing none. Yes. Just you know, when you meet next, just if you can think about how much longer you might need, if it's a week or if it's longer, and then just communicate with me and Devin about that. Yeah, but I fully understand all the points you made are very valid points. So yeah, and I also appreciate that that it's going to take some time to, particularly in this area, as you're thinking about alternatives to what we currently do. It really is an investigative project, and that's going to take some time. I understand.
Thank you.
We had that one more question, Anne, about the getting into the deeper dive into the data that the police department collects, because I know Anne spent a lot of time looking at all of those reports that Chief O'Leary had sent us, and we want to like figure out if there's a way to determine what actually happens when there are these crisis calls. Like, okay, so we have a list of all those calls, but like, what happens? Do they get referred? Do they go to hospitalized? Do they get incarcerated, like, and then what's the follow-up? And Anne and Alexander jump in. Those were the sort of, we wanted to know if there was a way to get that data, or I'm sure there's some confidentiality issues perhaps, but I don't know. So we just wanted to ask about that, whether there's a way to get that information so that then we could have a better idea about what exists right now and what changes we'd like to make.
Also, just the coding in the, I'm trying to pull it up, but there was I fooled around with pulling out data from the type of call codes that the BPD had for 2018 and 2019, how many people were, here we go. Some of the call codes were unclear to me. So suspicious activity, what does that mean exactly? These are different call codes that the BPD uses to track how many calls were received and how many, what the end result was. Group disturbance, youth complaint. They're kind of broad descriptions, and I was wondering if there was a way of getting more information about what exactly, what falls into those categories in terms of our work as a committee, in terms, I don't know, Chief O'Leary, or do you?
I think if you get, if you get a
confused person vis-a-vis psychiatric evaluation, vis-a-vis intoxicated person, I mean, what do these mean exactly? Are there definitions?
Well, I think the way it's entered into the computer system is the way it's described to the call taker. So if a person calls up and says there's a group of kids out there drinking in the street, it's going to go in as a group of youth disturbing, and then you'd have to follow through the call to see what the callback is by the police. And if you wanted to give me some categories, the thing is, it's going to take some time because you have to call the calls up individually and then look at them. It's time consuming, and it's probably something that has to be done by people, and not just hitting the button in the computer and getting every callback like that. There was a discussion with our IT person and Fung and a member of the other committee on the police computer, those list of calls that everybody got, and to try to find an easy way to study them. I don't know the outcome of the call. I know that they talked for a while and they had a good conversation, and I'm not sure where it's going to head because we haven't had a meeting with the other group since, but that took place last Thursday. So that might be able to help somewhere along the line. And we are obviously going to give them access as much as we can, but there is some confidentiality when you're talking about a person's health. And that's one way I would describe it. As far as the follow-ups on some of the mental health calls,
any of them.
Well, the CIT unit tracks everything that they receive as a mental health call, and who responded to it, what the outcome is. Was it just a meeting? Was it a meeting and a referral? Is there follow-up being done? They have that, and it's stored in the database for CIT. But again, that's probably something that has to really be looked at because we can't reveal information on a person's identity. But they are pretty thorough in their follow-ups. So we could we could get things like that. And if you could kind of narrow it, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we find out what the other committee is doing after that conversation with the IT person and with Fung from the town's IT, and maybe that will help focus what you want, because we're more than happy to get to the information that you need.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I just made a little chart of call codes that seemed relevant to what our subcommittee was looking at in terms of vulnerable people in crisis. And there are actually a number of call codes that I didn't even put in my little chart because I didn't know if they were relevant or not. If there was some sort of description, and I guess there isn't, of what a call code is, it's not so much even the follow-up, just so we understand the data that's listed. But yeah, maybe with the other committee, which committee is that? That's the
Reform Committee.
But which was it the whole group or was it a subcommittee?
He had just asked to meet with well, it went back to the discussion. It started over the fact that we couldn't get a year's worth of calls and we had to get them at 30-day intervals. So he asked to speak to the town's IT. So we hooked him up with Fung, town's IT representative, and Scott Wilder, who's our computer person, the department's IT. And they had the discussion last Thursday.
Right. If there's any data that we could share, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
Or outcomes from that call. Thank you.
I'll follow up on that for you.
And I can check in with Ron Wilkinson because he was the one who did the call. So.
Oh.
Okay. All right. Okay. Oh, I think that was it, right, from our subcommittee? We've covered everything. Okay.
Great. And I'll just say, anytime you need to check in with Dan, you can do that directly. That's just fine. You can even do a call with Dan or a Zoom with Dan and just sort of go through some questions. You don't need to notice that or anything like that. So
okay.
Feel free to just reach out directly about anything we can do to help make the work. We don't want to stand in the way of getting the work done. So if you have a question about is this okay, just ask and we'll let you know.
I'll second that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Thibault. Walk and talk. How things going?
Hey, things are going okay. It's been a struggle to get the schedule working, but I think we've nailed down Wednesday mornings at 9 is going to be our nailed down date. Whether or not we need it every week, it will be there because it's just been too much. So we met once and there's been research happening outside of the meeting, hasn't been brought together yet. And this Google Doc idea is thrilling because that's amazing that we can do that. So we will be doing that immediately. So yes, that's pretty much what's happening. So in this Google Docs situation, where is the line there? Commenting? Can I not comment on things that people put there? Like,
well, I think because it's for the public view and you're putting it on, and Mike can correct me if he's more of an expert on this than I am, obviously, but because the public can view it and it's accessible to the public, you can put in the notes that you have, the recommendations, the thoughts, opinions, and then comment on others. Like it's a live document, but it's viewable to the public. They can view it. So amazing. Okay, great. Well, actually, for Mike, well, no, I think that's my answer, and Mike can weigh in more, but I guess I can look into that a little bit more too. Maybe even talk with Mike about how it works, or Mike can shed light on how it works a little bit more too.
Yeah. So I have to be careful because I have the practical knowledge, but not the legal background here. So, but generally speaking, as long as you're not putting out opinion on a closed system that reaches a quorum of the subcommittee or the committee, as long as you're not putting out something that might sway someone's vote on the subcommittee or the committee, you can put up factual information. And if you're putting something out in a public forum, website that's accessible to the public, Facebook page, you can express an opinion as long as it's available to everybody. And the Attorney General has recognized that Facebook is, as a practical matter, available to the public.
Wow. Okay.
That's answer your question. Is that helpful?
Yes, it's enormously helpful. Thank you. Enormously helpful. I was very, very stressed out about how this work is possible.
Okay. Well, let me also say, I mean, Michael may cringe when I say this, but the very worst thing that can happen is that somebody will write a complaint to the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General will take a look at what happened, and they'll send back a note saying, you'll have to explain that it was inadvertent or you didn't understand the rules or whatever, and they'll send back a note saying, don't do it again. Okay.
Okay.
So the penalty for somebody on a committee like this, or for the committee as a whole or the town, is it's a slap on the wrist. You don't want to incur it, because the next time it happens, it won't be a slap on the wrist. But generally speaking, it's not something to worry about enormously.
Okay, great. I have no intention of breaking rules, but this is game changer.
Yeah, you have to navigate this stuff, and it's not intuitive.
Yep, cool. Also, we're trying to navigate where and how we engage with the Community Engagement Committee, because obviously Walk and Talk is about the community and how it experiences policing in a very focused way. Right. So there will also be some kind of interviews that happen and information gathering in that way. And I know that the Reform Committee is also very enthusiastic about talking between the two groups to see what's there. But all of this, we haven't been able to talk in depth about all this. So this is the scattered things that are happening and about to come together next time we meet.
Yeah, well, it's like Kristen said. I mean, if you use a tool that's accessible, or a repository that's accessible for everybody, first of all, it's asynchronous. That is, you can post when it's convenient for you to post. And the second thing, as long as the public can see it, you're golden.
Fantastic. That's it.
Great. Okay. Yes. So actually, I did want to briefly talk about the survey. I know Eitan's got some stuff he wanted to share about it. I'll also say that thanks to our friends at Brookline Housing and the Planning Department, we have the addresses of all the units that are affordable in Brookline, including those in public housing and those that are not, and that we can actually work to include in our survey. I'm sure Eitan can share more about what that means and anything else you'd like to say about it.
Thanks. So, right, I'm just at the stage of, it's like with anything, it's not like just a easily mergeable thing, so I'm working on it. But I just wanted to talk briefly about the structure of the oversampling and just get feedback. So there's two components of the sampling. One is to try to solicit responses from every person who's in affordable housing. My instinct is to have that be non-senior affordable housing. That is, we have some big apartment buildings that are for seniors, and I didn't know, my instinct was that we don't need to oversample them, but that was just my instinct, but we can. And then the other thing, I can't remember who suggested this, but it was a good suggestion last week. We ran the Brookline town list through a racial prediction software, which basically it's the Census Bureau has, for every single last name, surname, the probability that is of different racial groups. And the algorithm, without getting into too much details, combines that with some data from census blocks and gives everyone the prediction of, given their name and where they live, the probability that they are of different racial groups. And so through that, we can sample everyone, for example, that has a 10% chance or more of being in a of being non-white. When we did this, it looks like, and we didn't have the full list of affordable housing units, so but just on the racial predictions alone, it looks like we'll be sampling, we'll be soliciting, over 1,000 African Americans, over 1,000 Latinos, and more. What?
I think you had said like 4,000 Asian.
Yeah, that's right. So I just want to make sure, I want to just confirm two things. So one is your instincts about whether to do all affordable, to send something to everyone in affordable housing or just non-senior affordable housing. And then my second question is, well, just sort of a point that, we did this racial prediction model. I think that is the best way to identify non-white residents who are in non-affordable housing. And I just want to make sure that that's okay with everyone, basically.
Well, I was the one who suggested using it through the name software, and I think that's great because that's especially important with the Asian population. And I think the software works better for the Asian population than some other populations. I've done it by hand myself with the voter list. So
yeah, it's pretty good. And I can give it, obviously everyone can look at it. You can look yourself up, what your predictions are and all that. Yeah. Mike has a question.
I appreciate that.
Mike, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so on the senior housing, my sort of gut reaction is that it's important to survey, to sample that population in the same way as you survey the rest of the affordable housing population, unless you expect a higher response rate for some reason. And it may be that seniors fill out surveys at a higher level. I'm not quite sure. And the reason that I'm suggesting that is that I think there'll be a strong level of support for policing as it is currently done on the part of some of the folks in senior housing, just as there was a strong level of support for the police budget from one segment of certainly one segment of the population that was perhaps a surprise to some people. And I think it's important to understand that support from a political perspective. If you're trying to make a change, it's important to understand where the resistance to that change might be. So if in your judgment, you're going to get a good sample back from the seniors in affordable housing, fine. But if you feel like there's a chance that that they won't respond in the same proportion as you would need in order to get a good sample, then you should oversample. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, so I mean, my instinct was we will certainly have no trouble having enough data from older residents as a demographic group, or older white residents as a demographic group.
Right.
And so the question is whether older residents who live in affordable units have distinct preferences from the rest of the population, such that we need to worry about getting enough of them in our sample. That's really
That's right. That's articulated very well. Yeah. Okay.
And I would just say, in my view, that
was just my comment was that it's important to hear from that group, even if you don't really. I guess there's only one way to say it. Even if we don't necessarily like the answer, it's important to hear from them.
Yeah, and I think that'll be happening. My understanding is that the central purpose of oversampling is to ensure that we get, this is one of our concerns is how many responses we'll get from folks in communities of color, and that if we're going to do oversampling, it should be targeted in that way. but let's see what others think. Bonnie?
Yeah, I'm really curious about the name recognition or the name race connection thing. Because for instance, my last name, Bastien, is, when you Google it, it's mostly Haitian people that come up. I am not Haitian. So I'm really curious how that works. And I know that this is a combination of, because obviously not all Black and people of color live in low income housing. So the alternative, so the additional catch to making sure we cover all of public housing and low income housing, and then also have this name recognition thing so things can go to people who do not live in public housing. Right? Am I understanding that correctly? Yes?
Sorry, repeat what, I got a little confused there. The goal is?
So I'm just trying to reflect back what I think I understand so that you can correct me if I'm incorrect. So we definitely want to cover public housing because a large portion of our Black community and people of color, a large portion of them live in public housing, but obviously not everybody lives in public housing. Therefore, there's a name recognition race tool that to use to be able to oversample other other places, other neighborhoods.
That's right. And
people
yes,
more specifically targeted.
That's right. And we use this in similar contexts. Like I use software like this when I've been in voting rights litigation, trying to understand like who is affected by a voter ID law. And in most states, you don't have race on the voter file. So we use this to try to assess, we know who doesn't have voter ID, and then we use like a race matching software to try to figure out, well, what is the racial composition of people who do or don't have an ID? So it's in regular use. It's imperfect. You are right, by the way. I mean, of course you're right. Haitian name, your race probabilities come out as such. And so it's imperfect, but it does exactly pick it. The affordable housing part of this, I think, targets a population that A, might have more interaction with the police, and B, has a higher probability of being non-white. And so if you live in affordable housing and you're African-American and your name is John Smith, the race prediction might not target you. But if we solicit everyone in affordable housing, then you would self-identify as African-American on the survey, and we would learn about that. Versus if you have a name that does, according to the census, make you statistically more likely to be African-American, then we would find you through the name recognition.
So, and if I may add, Bonnie, it's more important, it's especially important for the Asian population because we don't have the same patterns of residential segregation in Brookline. So in order to make sure there's an adequate or oversample of Asians, and it works better with the Asian population, obviously, with the last name analysis. From what I understand, it doesn't work great with African Americans. There's actually better ways of predicting that. But I wanted to make sure we sampled enough Asians since we're the largest minority in town.
Absolutely. But also the fact that this isn't so great for Black people is a big issue in this context. I don't have a better solution, certainly.
Yeah, I think we're gonna do well. I mean, the fact that we have, I think, what did I tell you, Raul, is like 1,300 African Americans. Again, if we have 10 even or 20% response rate, we'll have a lot of data. Definitely sufficient data to do some analysis and to compare that population with the white population or with the Latino population.
Yep. Cool.
10 minutes in our time together before I know the Envisioning subcommittee needs to meet.
Sorry. So yes to older affordable housing or no?
Well, let's get Kristen's got his hand up. Let's get Kristen in and then we'll see.
I think we're fortunate in that we're getting to a number of issues that I think that the subcommittee meeting that we have scheduled right after this is going to be able to take a baton pass on. And so I think I just wanted to make sure I understand what you're asking of us, Eitan, is that we didn't set out to do this survey to get comparability with Somerville and with Medford. I think we were trying to leverage the fact that there was a survey that was out there that might be of value to us in doing that. And I think that the question that I hear you asking is really around, do the methods that we have to implement in Brookline with this survey, with this instrument, in order to get a critical number of folks across communities of color to respond, are we comfortable with the methods that need to be implemented? Is that the question that you're asking of us?
Well, I mean, on the senior question, I think it could go either way. I just don't have a strong prior sense about it. On the race matching, I mean, it seems like this is the most straightforward way to do this here. It's used in other similar contexts. So I was more just saying it to follow up from Chi-Chi's suggestion to do it. And, you know, unless there's a reason not to do it, we should do it. I mean, I think it's clearly better than the alternative, which is not doing it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's the difference there. You know, it seems to me, you know, again, if the purpose of oversampling is to increase the probability that we'll hear from communities of color, then we should focus our oversampling in those where that's most likely to be the case. And so, you know, to answer your question, I would say not oversampling, you know, communities that are entirely filled with seniors, with the understanding that some of those folks are going to get captured in the general sample as well. So
that's right. So there's some good buildings there.
excluding.
We're surveying, you know, half the town basically.
Right. Okay, great.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody. So last thing, I've got to do what I think will be a relatively brief report. You know, some of our subcommittees are just getting underway. Others will be meeting for the first time in the next few days. You know, so my plan is for Tuesday, I think during you know, the early part of the meeting is just to let folks know that we've been meeting. We meet on Fridays. They're welcome to join. I'll name the various subcommittees and share the briefs that we have for each subcommittee in terms of like what, you know, how you know, the breakdown of what your work is expected to be, and some of those deadlines. I'll make some updates to those as well. And is there anything else that you think it's important for me to share with the board at this early stage? I'll talk about the survey, those kinds of things, but anything else? All right. And I will, of course, let them know how phenomenal you've all been and committed to this work. And, you know, for many of us also just how personal this work is. And so this will be one of the, hopefully many times I get to thank you all publicly for stepping up in this way. And that includes all the staff who've been supporting our work along the way too. So just want to say thank you in this context. I'll say it again on Tuesday and probably many, many more times to come. So, all right, anything else then before we go? It's 8:54. I want to wrap this up by 9. I'm going to pop into the Envisioning subcommittee myself and just be a fly on the wall. But anything else for the good of the order? All right, thank you all. Some of you get an hour back. The rest of you I'll see in a few minutes. And please, please, please make sure, as I said before, we will use next Friday's time for subcommittee meetings. So our regular viewers, we won't have a full task force meeting next Friday from 8 to 10. Keep an eye on the calendar and be sure to sign up for alerts so that you can be notified when our subcommittees are going to be meeting as well. Sound good? All right. Talk soon, everybody. Take care.